What are you afraid of? With the coronavirus, there's a lot of talk about fear, there's a lot of panic in the air, panic buying, and people seem to be afraid. But it's not just the coronavirus that people are afraid of. A simple Google search will show you thousands of different phobias that people have. Fear of flying, fear of confined spaces, and as the funny clip goes, even fear of being buried alive in a box. So we as a human race, we tend to be quite afraid of a number of different things. But ultimately, I think if you look behind all of these other fears, they all lead to one single fear, and that's the fear of not having control of our destiny, of our life. And ultimately, at the end of that, is the fear of death. At the end of all of these other fears, we're just afraid of dying. So why are we afraid of dying? What are we worried about? If we buy what we're told, that we are just born and we live a good life and then we die, and there's no consequence to our life, there's no purpose to our life, then we shouldn't be afraid of dying. We should live this life however we want to, and then ultimately we can die. But I think that you and I somehow know much deeper inside that there is a purpose to life, that there is a meaning to life. And in fact, we human beings, and even the animals, we're made to live. We're made to survive. You can see that throughout history. You can see that in the Shoah. There's a tremendous desire and drive in people to survive. So why do we want to survive? Why do we want to live? Well, quite simply, we're made to live. Death should not be a natural thing. It was not originally a natural thing as God intended it to be. But as it is now, we all die and we all have this fear of death. So how can we overcome this fear of death? Fear of a virus, fear of a flight crashing, fear of a car crash, ultimately leading to our demise. How can we control this? How can we fight this fear of death? The way that we are able to overcome our fears is by knowing what happens after we die. Or maybe it's better if I say knowing who happens after we die. The Bible teaches very simply that when we die, we stand face to face with God. And if we know God, if we've met Him in this life, then that's not a cause of concern. That's a cause of great joy, because we know that ultimately God is good and that one day we will be with Him in paradise, no matter what happens to us, whether it be being infected by a virus or something else that happens. But if we don't know Him during this time, then we can actually live in fear of that encounter. And ironically enough, throughout the whole of the Bible, never once are we told to fear anything. We're told actually so often that we shouldn't be afraid. There is only one exception. And at one point, Jesus, Yeshua himself, tells us that we should be afraid of God. Why? Because ultimately, if we don't know God here on this earth and we die, we will be separated from Him. We will live an existence that is completely meaningless and completely pointless. We'll be completely and utterly separated from Him, the source of all goodness, for the whole of eternity. So in the crisis, there is good news. In this crisis, in this time of fear, when we're panicking, when we're worried, we're not sure what's going to happen next, we're not sure about our loved ones, we're not sure if we're going to get infected, there is hope and there is good news. Because you see, when Yeshua, Jesus, came 2,000 years ago, He came for a sole purpose. He came to defeat death. And when He died as the punishment of all of the wrong things that you and I have done, when He died, He defeated death because He rose again from the grave. And as a result, that means that you and I can also defeat death. If we know Him, if we are secure in Him, then one day, even after we die, we will live again. And that is the wonderful message. That's the message that Yeshua himself came to give. So in this time of turbulence, in this time of worrying, in this time of doubt and questioning, be encouraged. There is good news. But there's only good news if you know the giver of that good news, and that is Yeshua. So what are you afraid of? Ultimately, it doesn't matter. The greater question is where is your hope? And is it found in Yeshua? If it's not, I encourage you, come to Him and give yourself to Him. Ask Him to give you this power over death, because that's what He promises. So that one day you can be with Him in an environment that is free from not just coronavirus, but it's free from all pain and all death and all suffering, because ultimately that is what He promises.